My stepmother's palm connected with my face, the sound echoing through my crowded dorm room. My roommate froze in shock as the heat bloomed across my cheek. Before I could react, a heavy knock broke the silence. A man in a worn leather jacket stepped inside, his gaze fixing on my stepmother with terrifying calm. He told me he knew my birth mother and that she had been waiting for this exact moment. My name is Riley Bennett. I am 21 years old. I live in room 307 of the Centura Residence Hall at Hawthorne State University. I am a sophomore, double majoring in accounting and information systems, which means I live in a world of balanced ledgers and logical code. I pay for every credit, every textbook, and every late-night coffee myself. My tuition is covered by 2 scholarships, one academic, one for state residents, and the gap is filled by the 20 hours I work weekly at the campus IT help desk. I am, by nature and by training, a person who reconciles. I check the numbers. They always have to balance. It was a Tuesday night, maybe 8 p.m. The air in the dorm was stale, smelling vaguely of instant noodles and dryer sheets. My roommate, Chloe, was across the room, headphones on, her face illuminated by the glow of her tablet. The only sounds were the quiet hum of my laptop and the distant, muffled sound of someone practicing guitar down the hall. I was in my zone, my accounting homework mindset, cross-referencing my bank account statement with my tuition portal. I like seeing the numbers line up. Scholarship applied, payment posted, balance 0. But the balance was not 0. It showed a new disbursement, a big one, $20,000. My blood went cold. This was not a scholarship. It was labeled Federal Student Loan, unsubsidized. My name was on it, my social security number, my address. But I had not applied for it. I never take loans I cannot pay back immediately. I was already covered for the semester. I clicked into the details. The loan was originated 3 days ago. The electronic signature was Riley A. Bennett. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic bird in a cage. I did not sign this. I would know if I signed something for $20,000. As if on cue. My phone lit up on the desk. A vibration. Then another. Then a cascade. A group text from my father, Thomas, and my stepmother, Lydia. Dad. Riley. Lydia told me you called the financial aid office. Don't make a scene. Lydia. I was told you were trying to dispute the new loan. You are being incredibly dramatic. Lydia. It is just a standard parent-assisted loan. We are helping you. Your father co-signed. Lydia. I just signed the paperwork for you on the portal to make it easier. You should be saying thank you. My hands were shaking. I could not feel my fingers. I just signed the paperwork for you. She had my social security number. She had my student portal password, which I had been foolish enough to give her during freshman orientation in case of emergencies. This was not an emergency. This was fraud. Before I could even type a response, there was a commotion at our door. It was pushed open, not knocked on. Lydia Bennett stood there. She was not supposed to be here. Denver was 2 hours from their suburban life in Colorado Springs. She was wearing a cream-colored trench coat that probably cost more than my meal plan for the entire year. Her hair was a perfect blonde helmet, her makeup immaculate. She smelled of expensive perfume, a heavy gardenia scent that always choked the air. Behind her, looking flustered, was our floor's RA, a junior named Maya. Ma'am, you cannot just barge into a resident's room, Maya said, trying to sound authoritative but clearly intimidated. This is my daughter, Lydia said, her voice sharp and cutting, dismissing Maya with a flick of her wrist. She is having a psychological episode. I am her mother. Chloe pulled her headphones off, her eyes wide. Riley? Who is this? Lydia, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I stood up, trying to put my body between her and my laptop. Lydia ignored Maya and Chloe, stepping into the tiny 12-by-12 room as if she owned it. The high-end leather of her handbag brushed against my cheap IKEA desk lamp. You, she hissed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. How dare you? I tried to find my auditor face, the one I was learning in my classes, calm, detached, just the facts. How dare I repeated, my voice gaining a little strength. You used my information. You committed identity theft. Lydia laughed, a short, ugly sound. Identity theft? Do not use words you learned in your little classes. Riley, I am your mother. I was securing your future. That money is for your next semester, to make sure you have a safety net. I have a safety net, I said, gesturing to my scholarships, my work schedule taped to the wall. I am paying for my school. That loan is debt in my name. You are ungrateful, she snapped. The mask of the concerned parent was gone, replaced by the familiar cold fury I knew from my teenage years. After everything we have done for you, after all the sacrifices. I did not know what sacrifices she was talking about. She had not worked a day since marrying my father. You called the financial aid office, she continued, taking a step closer. The gardenia smell was overwhelming. You tried to stop it. You embarrassed me. Good, I said. The word was out before I could stop it. That was when she lunged. She did not go for me. She went for the laptop, where the evidence was displayed on the screen. We are not discussing this with an audience. We will handle this at home. This is my home, I shot back, grabbing the laptop lid. She was stronger than she looked. She yanked it hard. I held on. For a second, we were locked in a stupid, desperate tug-of-war over a piece of aluminum. Let go, Riley. No, this is my property. You cannot be here. She let go of the laptop abruptly and shoved me, not with her hands, but with her full body weight. My back hit the concrete block wall of the dorm. The impact knocked the wind out of me. A sharp, painful oof. My head snapped back and hit the wall with a dull thud. Chloe screamed, "Stop! Get out!" My ears were ringing. Lydia's face was inches from mine, twisted into a mask of pure rage. You ungrateful little... And then her hand came up. My stepmother's palm connected with my face, the sound echoing through my crowded dorm room. It was not a light tap. It was a full, open-palmed strike that snapped my head to the side. My right cheek exploded in heat. Tears sprang to my eyes instantly, not from sadness, but from the sheer shock and pain. My roommate froze in shock. I could see her in my peripheral vision, phone in hand, shaking. The door to our room was still open. The hallway, usually quiet on a Tuesday, was suddenly full of faces. Students peeking out of their rooms, drawn by the yelling. I saw the red glow of a phone recording. What is going on? The RA, Maya, was back, her voice trembling. Ma'am, you have to leave. I am calling campus security. This is a family matter, Lydia yelled, not at Maya, but at the hallway at large. She was trying to control the narrative. My daughter is unwell. She turned back to me. I was still pinned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, the sting on my cheek radiating down my neck. Lydia's eyes were terrifyingly bright. She grabbed my left wrist, her fingers digging in, her designer rings pressing into my skin. You will reverse that call to the financial aid office. You will apologize. You will sign the papers I tell you to sign, or I swear. Riley, I will make sure you have nothing. I tried to pull my arm away, but her grip was like steel. This was the real Lydia, the one my father pretended not to see. She was leaning in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Do you understand me? She raised her hand again, and I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut. Knock, knock, knock. It was not a frantic, panicked sound. It was deep, heavy, and methodical. It cut through the tension like a blade. Lydia froze, her hand, poised to strike again, slowly lowered. The faces in the hall parted. I opened my eyes. A man stood in the doorway. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had seen too much. He wore an old, worn brown leather jacket and jeans. A Hawthorne State visitor pass was clipped to his pocket. He did not look at the students. He did not look at the RA. His gaze, calm and steady, landed directly on Lydia. He held her stare for a beat, An unnerving silence where he seemed to be cataloging her. Then, his eyes moved to me. He saw my hand trapped in her grip. He saw the bright red mark on my cheek. "Riley Bennett?" he asked. His voice was quiet but carried. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. Lydia, finally finding her voice, let go of my wrist, as if my skin had suddenly burned her. She smoothed her trench coat, attempting to regain her composure. "Excuse me, who are you?" "This is a private family situation." The man ignored her completely. He looked right at me. "My name is Matthew Cole." He took a half step into the room, and the crowd of students seemed to shrink back, sensing a shift in gravity. He told me he knew my birth mother, and that she had been waiting for this exact moment. The entire room went silent. Even the hallway was quiet. Lydia's perfectly made-up face paled, losing its color under the harsh fluorescent dorm lights. "What did you say?" Matthew finally turned his gaze back to her, and this time, his eyes were not calm. They were cold. I said, "I knew her mother, Grace." He looked back at me, his expression softening just a fraction. "And I think it's time you knew the truth about what she left for you, and about the woman who is standing here hitting you." I stood there, trembling against the cold wall, my cheek on fire, my wrist aching. I was surrounded by the shocked, curious faces of my classmates, the terrified face of my roommate, the furious, cornered face of my stepmother, and the impossible calm of this stranger. The numbers in my bank account suddenly felt insignificant. The $20,000 fraud was no longer the problem. It was just a symptom. I realized this was not just a fight over a student loan. This was not just a Tuesday night dorm dispute. This was the beginning of a war that had been simmering for 10 years, and I had just been handed my first weapon. The stranger's words hung in the air of my dorm room, vibrating with a truth I had been too afraid to voice for a decade. "I knew your mother." Those 4 syllables were a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut since I was 11 years old. As I stood there, clutching my stinging wrist, the sterile white walls of the dormitory dissolved. The smell of floor wax and cheap ramen faded, replaced by the scent of pine needles and cold mountain air. I was not in Denver anymore. I was back in the small, clapboard house on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, where the snow piled high in the winter and the stars looked like spilled sugar on black velvet. My mother, Grace, was not a woman who believed in fairy tales. She believed in spreadsheets. She worked for a small tech firm that handled logistics for trucking companies, a job that required her to be meticulous, organized, and perpetually calm. She was the one who taught me that freedom was not about doing whatever you wanted. It was about being able to afford your choices. I remember sitting at our scratched oak kitchen table when I was 10, watching her balance her checkbook. She did not use a calculator. Her pencil moved in quick, sharp strokes. She explained to me that a woman must always have a fund that only she knew about. She called it the rainy day jar. But it was not an actual jar. It was a concept, a wall between us and the world. That wall collapsed on a Tuesday in February, nearly 10 years ago. The police report said she lost control on Interstate 40 during a freak blizzard. They said the visibility was 0 and the ice was black. They said she likely did not feel a thing. The case was closed with the terrifying efficiency of a bureaucracy that sees tragedy as paperwork. There was a funeral where people brought casseroles covered in tinfoil and whispered about how tragic it was, leaving a father and a daughter alone in that drafty house. But the tragedy was not just the loss. It was the vacuum it created, and nature abhors a vacuum. Lydia entered that vacuum less than 6 months later. I do not know exactly where my father met her. Thomas Bennett was a man who drifted through grief like a ghost, unmoored and desperate for someone to tell him where to stand. Lydia appeared like a beacon. She was everything my mother was not. Where Grace wore practical wool sweaters and jeans, Lydia wore silk blouses and tailored blazers. She told us she was a financial consultant for high-net-worth individuals, a title that sounded impressive but meant absolutely nothing when you tried to pin down exactly what she did or which firm she worked for. She spoke in rapid-fire buzzwords about asset allocation and wealth management, and my father, who was a high school history teacher and knew nothing about money, looked at her as if she were a savior. They married at the courthouse 8 months after the funeral. I wore a blue dress that scratched my neck, and I did not smile in a single photograph. The erasure of Grace Bennett began the week Lydia moved in. It was not explosive. It was a slow, suffocating tide. First, it was the furniture. Lydia said the old oak table was depressing and cluttered the energy of the room. It was replaced by a glass and chrome dining set that was always cold to the touch. Then it was the decorations. My mother's collection of hand-painted ceramic bowls vanished, replaced by abstract sculptures that looked like twisted metal. "We need to declutter, Riley," Lydia had said, holding a trash bag open. "We need to make space for the new." I watched her sweep my mother's life into donations boxes. I managed to save a few books in a silver locket, hiding them under the floorboards in my closet like contraband. But the biggest change wasn't the furniture. It was the silence in the house, which was soon replaced by the low, tense hum of conversations I was not supposed to hear. I would sit at the top of the stairs at night, hugging my knees, listening to them in the living room. My father's voice would be low, pleading, sounding tired. Lydia's voice was always sharp, clipped, and relentless. "The life insurance payout is sitting in a savings account earning 0.1% interest. Thomas," Lydia would say, "it is irresponsible. Grace would not have wanted that money to rot. I can move it into a high-yield managed fund. My firm can handle it." "I don't know, Lydia," my father would murmur. "Grace wanted that for Riley's college. She talked about a trust." "A trust is restrictive, and the fees are exorbitant. If you sign the power of attorney over to me, I can restructure the portfolio. We can double that money by the time she is 18. Do you not trust me? Do you think I do not want what is best for this family?" That was her weapon, the question of trust. She wielded it like a knife. If my father hesitated, he was accusing her. If he asked for details, he was undermining her expertise. Eventually, the argument stopped. The silence returned, but it was heavier now. By the time I was 14, the narrative of our lives had completely shifted. According to Lydia, we were broke. The investments were tied up. She said, the market was volatile. We had to tighten our belts. "Family means sacrifice, Riley," she told me one afternoon when I asked for money to go on a school field trip. She was unboxing a pair of Italian leather boots as she said it. "Your father and I are doing everything we can just to keep the lights on. You need to step up." So I did. I stepped up. I got a work permit the day I turned 15. I worked at a local diner, scrubbing grease off the grill and pouring coffee for truckers. I worked weekends at the public library shelving books. Every paycheck I earned, I brought home. Lydia would stand there with her hand out, waiting. "This will go into your college savings," she would say, tucking my $300 of hard-earned cash into her designer wallet. "I am managing it for you so you do not spend it on frivolous things. You will thank me later." I wore clothes from the thrift store down the street. I taped my sneakers when the soles started to peel. Meanwhile, Lydia drove a leased luxury sedan, and the packages from high-end department stores never stopped arriving. When I pointed this out to my father, he just looked away, rubbing his temples. "Riley, please," he would say, his voice thin and brittle. "Your mother, Lydia, she knows what she is doing with the finances. She is stressed. Do not make it harder on her. Do not make her sad." He had stopped being my father and had become her apologist. He was terrified of losing her, terrified of being alone again. So he let her consume us. But I had a feeling, a gnawing, persistent ache in my gut that something was wrong. I remembered my mother's voice. I remembered her showing me a heavy binder once, years ago. She had tapped the cover and told me that if anything ever happened to her, everything I needed was inside. That binder had vanished the week after the funeral. When I started applying for colleges, the control tightened into a stranglehold. I needed tax returns to fill out my financial aid forms. I needed social security numbers. Lydia refused to hand them over. "You are a child," Riley, she said, sitting at the glass dining table, her laptop open. You will mess up the forms. Give me your login for the university portal. I will handle the FAFSA. I will handle the loans. It is complicated financial language. You are not ready for that. I fought her on it. I screamed. I cried. But my father stood there, looking at the floor, and said, "Let her help you, Riley. She is a professional." So I gave her the password. I typed it in myself, feeling a sick sense of defeat. That was the moment the trap snapped shut. From that day on, Lydia controlled the flow of information. She told me how much aid I got. She told me what loans were taken out. She told me there was just enough to cover tuition if I continued to work through school. "We are stretching ourselves thin for you," she would remind me every time I came home for a holiday. "You have no idea the debt we are taking on to send you to that school." Guilt. That was the currency she traded in. She made me feel like a burden, a parasite sucking the life out of the family, while she bravely managed the books. I worked double shifts in the summer. I skipped meals to save money on food. I studied accounting specifically because I wanted to understand the language she used to beat me into submission. One night, during my senior year of high school, just before I left for Hawthorne State, I found my mother's old desktop computer in the garage. It was covered in dust, buried under boxes of Lydia's seasonal decor. My heart hammered against my ribs as I plugged it in. The old monitor flickered to life, the fan whirring loudly. I wanted to find something, anything, an old email, a document, a letter. I knew my mother. She would not have left me without a map. The operating system loaded. I clicked on her old email icon. It was still there. The username saved. Password required. I tried every combination I could think of. Her birthday, my birthday, the name of our old dog. Finally, I tried the name of the street we lived on. Incorrect password. I clicked Forgot Password. The screen refreshed. A recovery code has been sent to Else Bennett, familycare@securemail.com. My stomach dropped. That was not my mother's email. That was Lydia's. She had gone into the old accounts. She had changed the recovery options. She had locked the doors and swallowed the keys. I sat there in the freezing garage, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the tears running down my face. I realized then that Lydia had not just stolen my father and my house. She had stolen my history. She had hermetically sealed my mother's legacy behind a firewall I could not breach. For years, I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had lost. I went to college determined to just survive, to get my degree and escape her orbit forever. I thought if I just kept my head down, paid my own way, and didn't ask questions, she would leave me alone. But standing in my dorm room, with a strange man telling me he knew Grace, I realized I was wrong. The past was not locked away. It was standing in front of me in a worn leather jacket, and for the first time since I was 11 years old, I did not feel like the little girl crying at the top of the stairs. I felt like the daughter of the woman who believed in rainy day funds and ironclad logistics. The sting on my cheek began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Lydia had changed the passwords. She had burned the papers. She had charmed my father, but she had forgotten one variable in her risk assessment. She had forgotten that I was Grace Bennett's daughter, and I was done being the victim. "Tell me," I said to Matthew Cole, my voice steady despite the chaos in the room. "Tell me everything she did not want me to know." The campus security officers escorted Lydia out of the building 5 minutes after Matthew Cole stepped into my room. She did not go quietly. I could hear her voice echoing down the hallway, threatening lawsuits, threatening the resident advisor, and shouting that her daughter was being kidnapped by strangers. But she was gone. The silence she left behind was heavy and ringing. Maya, my RA, looked pale. She stood by the open door, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Riley," she said, her voice shaky, "I have to file an incident report, but right now, I think you need a minute. We can go to the third-floor common room. It is empty at this hour." I nodded. My cheek was throbbing with a dull, hot pulse where Lydia had struck me. I grabbed my laptop bag out of instinct, the accountant's instinct that says data is the only safety, and followed Maya and Matthew down the hall. The common room was a sterile space with mismatched couches and a vending machine that hummed too loudly. Maya sat in the corner, giving us space but keeping an eye on things, fulfilling her duty. Matthew Cole sat opposite me at a low laminate table. He opened a battered messenger bag and pulled out a sleek, high-end laptop that looked incongruous with his worn leather jacket. "You are studying accounting and information systems," Matthew said. It was not a question. He was reading from a file on his screen. "Top 5% of your class, Dean's List every semester." "Who are you?" I asked. My voice sounded scrapier than usual. "You said you knew my mother. You said you knew Grace." "I did," Matthew said. He leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. His hands were rough, but his nails were trimmed short and clean. "Your mother and I worked together at a firm called Northline Forensic Analytics. It does not exist anymore. We were bought out and dissolved about 5 years ago." I frowned. "My mother worked in logistics. She managed shipping schedules." "That was her cover," Matthew corrected gently. "Or rather, that was the boring part of her job she told people about to avoid questions. Grace was a senior risk analyst. We specialized in corporate fraud investigation. She was the best I ever saw at tracking shell companies and hidden assets." The world tilted slightly on its axis. My mother, the woman who baked cinnamon rolls and taught me to save pennies in a jar, was a fraud investigator? It made sense, though it explained her obsession with documentation, her insistence on reading the fine print, her distrust of easy money. "If she was so good," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat, "how did she not see Lydia coming?" "She did," Matthew said. The words hit me harder than Lydia's slap. He turned his laptop around so I could see the screen. It was not a standard desktop background. It was a complex interface of a data visualization tool. Nodes and lines connecting names and dates. 6 months before the accident, Matthew said, pointing to a timeline on the screen. "Grace came to me. She was worried about a new financial advisor your father had met, a woman named Lydia who was pushing some very aggressive, high-risk insurance products. At the time, Lydia was just an acquaintance, someone Thomas met at a district mixer. But Grace ran a background check. She found gaps in Lydia's employment history. She found aliases." I stared at the screen. The timeline showed dates from 10 years ago. "Grace was building a file," Matthew continued. "She was drafting a trust fund for you. Something irrevocable that Thomas could not touch and Lydia could not access. She brought the draft to my office on a Friday. She said she wanted me to be the trustee, not your father. She said Thomas was too trusting, too easily swayed." "What happened to the file?" I asked. "That is the problem," Matthew said. His face darkened. "The physical file was in her car the night of the crash. It was never recovered from the wreckage. And the digital backups? The night she died. Grace sent me an email. It was cryptic. It just said, 'If the storm gets bad, protect Riley. The keys are in the contingency folder.' But when I tried to access the server the next morning to pull the attachments, they were gone, wiped." He paused, letting that sink in. "A few weeks before the crash, Lydia actually came to our office," Matthew added. "She signed in at the front desk as a consultant for the Bennett family. She was there for maybe 20 minutes. I never saw her, but the log showed she was in the building. Later, when I went back to look for that log during the dissolution of the company, that page was missing." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Lydia had been in my mother's workspace. She had been circling us long before she stepped into our house as a grieving friend. "I looked for you," Matthew said softly. "After the funeral, I tried to contact Thomas. He blocked my number. He sent a cease and desist letter signed by a lawyer I had never heard of, saying I was harassing the family. Then Northline got bought out. I got moved to a field office in Chicago, and I lost the trail, until last week." "What happened last week?" I asked. "I am working as a contractor now," Matthew explained. "The university hired my current firm to audit their financial aid disbursements. They are looking for patterns of identity fraud in student loans. It is a standard procedure." He tapped a key, and a new window popped up. It was a spreadsheet full of rows of data. One row was highlighted in yellow. "I saw the name Riley Bennett," he said. "I recognized it immediately. I pulled the record because of the name, but I kept it because of the data." He pointed to a column labeled IP Address Origin. "This is the Parent Plus loan that was taken out 3 days ago," he said. "The one you found tonight, it was digitally signed by Thomas Bennett, but look at the contact email." I leaned in. The email listed was T. Bennett, secure, manage@gmail.com. "That is not my dad's email," I whispered. "He uses his school district email for everything." "Exactly," Matthew said. "And look at the IP address where the loan originated. It is a residential IP in Colorado Springs. I ran a cross-reference with some consumer data databases, legal ones, mostly. That same IP address, at the exact same timestamp, was logged into a luxury handbag retailer's checkout page. Someone was buying a $3,000 purse at the exact moment they were signing your father's name to a $20,000 student loan." My stomach turned over. Lydia. She had been shopping while she burdened me with debt. "But here's the part that made me come here tonight," Matthew said. "I looked at the history of your account access. For the last 3 years, your student portal, the one that houses your grades, your schedule, and your financial data, has been accessed consistently from that same IP address. But there are also logins from an IP address here on campus." "That is me," I said. "I log in from the library or my dorm." "Look closer," Matthew said. He zoomed in on a cluster of logins from 2 years ago. "These logins originated from your device, your laptop, but the user behavior flagged an alert in our system. The user went straight to the direct deposit settings, changed the routing number, waited 2 days for the confirmation, and then changed it back. Did you do that?" "No," I said. No, I never changed my routing number." Then it hit me. The memory washed over me with the smell of Lydia's gardenia perfume. It was Thanksgiving break, freshman year. I was in the kitchen, trying to finish a term paper on my old laptop. Lydia had come in, smiling that tight, fake smile. "Riley, honey, your father needs to check his bank email, but his old desktop is updating and it is taking forever. Can he just borrow your laptop for a second? He is so stressed about money." I had hesitated, but then my dad had walked in, looking tired and worn down, and I had felt that familiar pang of guilt. So I unlocked my laptop. I pushed it across the island. Lydia had taken it. She said she would just help him log in. She carried it into the living room. I heard them murmuring. She brought it back 10 minutes later. "Oh my God," I said, covering my mouth. "She used my laptop. She asked to borrow it to help my dad. She used my device to make the changes so it would look like I did it. It would look like the traffic came from my machine." "MAC address spoofing is harder to track if you physically possess the device," Matthew said, nodding approval at my deduction. "She used your own computer to authorize the diversion of your financial aid refunds. Did you ever wonder why your refund checks were smaller than the calculations said they should be?" "She told me the fees went up," I said. I felt sick. "She showed me a spreadsheet. She said the university increased the administrative costs." "There were no increased costs," Matthew said flatly. "She skimmed the difference, probably $2,000 or $3,000 a semester, just enough to be painful for you, but not enough to trigger an automatic federal audit." I sat back, the leather couch creaking. I felt violated. It wasn't just the money. It was the intimacy of the theft. She had been inside my digital life, moving things around, gaslighting me with spreadsheets while she stole the money I scrubbed toilets and fixed servers to earn. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, looking at Matthew. "Why not go to the police?" "Because right now, it looks like a family dispute," Matthew said. "Your father signed the loan. You gave her access to your laptop, without hard proof of coercion or unauthorized access. The police will say it is a civil matter. Lydia knows this. She operates in the gray areas where the law is slow to catch up." He closed the spreadsheet and opened a File Explorer window. "But Grace knew this day would come," he said. "She built a failsafe." He pointed to a folder on his desktop. It was simply labeled, Grace, Contingency. I recovered this from a fragmented backup on an old server drive I kept from Northline, Matthew said. I have tried to open it for 5 years. It is encrypted with a 256-bit key. It is military-grade protection. Grace was paranoid, and she was right to be. He double-clicked the folder. A password prompt appeared. It was a stark, blinking cursor against a black background. Enter decryption phrase. I tried everything I knew about her, Matthew admitted, sounding defeated for the first time. Her social security number, her anniversary, the coordinates of where she was born, nothing worked. But then, when I saw your name on that loan report, I realized I was looking at it wrong. Grace didn't build this for me. She built it for you. He pushed the laptop across the low table toward me. She knew you would be the one to open it, he said. She knew you would have her mind. Think, Riley, not like a daughter, but like an analyst, like the person she taught you to be. What is the one thing she told you that nobody else would know? What is the code? I looked at the blinking cursor. I thought about the rainy day jar. I thought about the kitchen table. I thought about the last time I saw her, waving to me from the driveway before she drove into the snow. Then I remembered something else. Not a date, not a name, a lesson. When I was 8, I had lost a $5 bill on the playground. I was crying because I had saved it for weeks. Grace had sat me down, wiped my face, and told me something I had written in the margin of every notebook I had owned since. It was her philosophy on money, on life, on the chaotic variables of the world. I reached out, my fingers hovered over the keys. I typed the phrase, using the specific formatting she always used in her ledgers, lowercase for variables, uppercase for constants. Freedom is calculated risk. I hit enter. The little hourglass spun for a second. My breath caught in my throat. The window flashed green. Access granted. The folder opened. It was not empty. It was full of PDF files, scanned images, and audio recordings, hundreds of megabytes of data. Matthew let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade. She did it, he whispered. I clicked on the first file. It was a scanned letter, dated 3 days before the accident. It was addressed to my daughter, Riley, when she is old enough to understand the math. But before I could read it, my eyes caught a subfolder titled Lydia Investigation Notes. I looked up at Matthew. The shock was replaced by a cold, hard determination. You said you wanted to help me, I said. I do, Matthew answered. Good, I said, turning the laptop back so we could both see. Because we are going to audit her. We are going to audit her entire life. It will not be easy, Matthew warned. She has your father, she has the house, she has the narrative. She has a $3,000 handbag bought with a fraudulent loan, I corrected him. And I have this, I tapped the screen. And I am an accounting major with a specialty in information systems. I don't need it to be easy. I just need the data to balance. Then let's get to work, Matthew said. Outside the common room window, the campus was dark, but inside, the glow of the screen illuminated the first step of my counterattack. I was done being the stepdaughter. I was the auditor now, and Lydia Bennett was about to fail her inspection. For the first time in my life, I did not look at a spreadsheet as a homework assignment. I looked at it as a crime scene. I sat in the common room, the hum of the vending machine the only background noise to the clicking of my keyboard. Matthew sat opposite me, working on his own laptop, but he was watching me closely, letting me drive. He knew that for this to work, I had to be the one to find the patterns. I had to own the discovery. I logged into the university's student financial portal using my credentials. My hands were steady now. The shock of the physical assault had faded into a cold, hard focus. I was an accounting major. I spent hours every week analyzing hypothetical companies, looking for variances, reconciling ledgers, and spotting inefficiencies. Now, the company was my life, and the variance was a $20,000 hole dug by the people who were supposed to protect me. I navigated to the History tab. It was a feature most students ignored. A log of every transaction, every disbursement, and every document modification associated with my student ID. I exported the entire data set to a CSV file and opened it in Excel. Filter by date, Matthew suggested quietly. Go back to the beginning of the semester. I did as he said. The rows populated the screen. Hundreds of lines of data. To anyone else, it would look like boring administrative clutter. To me, it was a narrative. Okay, I murmured, my finger tracing the screen. Here is the initial Pell Grant disbursement in August. Here is the state scholarship. Here is my tuition payment. Then I saw it. September 12th, 2:15 in the afternoon. Document upload. Income verification form. Status, approved. September 12th, I said aloud. That was a Tuesday. I quickly opened my digital calendar in another window. September 12th, I scrolled down to the time slot. 2:15 in the afternoon. I was in my advanced database management class, I said. I was sitting in a lecture hall without my laptop because the professor bans electronics. I remember that day. We had a pop quiz on paper. Check the access log, Matthew said. I toggled back to the financial portal and pulled up the security details for that specific transaction. The system recorded the IP address of the device that had uploaded the document. The IP address ended in 452. I copied the string of numbers and pasted it into a geolocation tool, the same kind we used in my system security elective. The result popped up instantly. Internet service provider, Comcast cable. Location, Aurora, Colorado. Residential. Aurora, the suburb where my father and Lydia lived. I was in class in downtown Denver, I said, my voice flat. And at the exact same minute, someone in my father's house was uploading income verification forms to my school portal. I took a screenshot. I pasted it into a new document. I labeled it Exhibit A, Unauthorized Access, Alibi Conflict. Keep going, Matthew said. That is just one instance. I went further back. I looked at the previous semester. May 4th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Loan adjustment request. Accepted. I checked my calendar. May 4th, final exams week. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I was taking my business law final. My phone and laptop were in my locker at the testing center. The IP address was the same, Aurora, residential. She increased my loan amount while I was taking a test, I whispered. She logged in, pretending to be me, and accepted the maximum unsubsidized loan offer. And where did that money go? Matthew asked. I traced the disbursement. It went to the university bursar to pay tuition. That seemed normal. But then I looked at the refund. When financial aid exceeds the cost of tuition, the school refunds the difference to the student for living expenses. May 10th. Refund processed. $2,400. Destined for bank account ending in 8890. I pulled my wallet out and looked at my debit card. My account ended in 1244. That is not my bank account, I said. Do you recognize it? I closed my eyes, thinking, 8890. It was familiar. Then I remembered the countless times Lydia had sent me to the grocery store with her card because she had a headache and couldn't drive. It is hers, I said. It is Lydia's personal checking account, the one she uses for her consulting expenses. I took another screenshot. Exhibit B, diversion of federal funds. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. I was building a case file. I created a master spreadsheet. Column A, date and time. Column B, my physical location. Column C, activity on portal. Column D, originating IP address. I worked for an hour, cross-referencing 3 years of data. The pattern was undeniable. Every time a refund was issued, every time a loan was increased, every time a notification preference was changed, it happened from the Aurora IP address while I was in class, at work, or asleep. She has been doing this since my freshman orientation, I said. She didn't just steal the money. She stole my identity. She made the system think I was the one asking for more debt. Now check the contact information, Matthew instructed. How was she getting the verification codes? The school uses two-factor authentication. I went to the profile settings. My phone number was listed as the primary contact. That made sense. But under secondary email and recovery contact, there was an address I had glossed over a dozen times because it looked so official. P. Bennett. familycare@gmail.com. I never created that, I said. It looks like something my dad would make for family bills. Or something someone would make to look like your dad, Matthew corrected. If she sets that as the recovery email, anytime she wants to change your password, the code goes there, not to you. Anytime a suspicious login alert is triggered, the warning goes there. She silenced the security system. I stared at the email address. It was so brazen. Family care. As if stripping my future of its assets was a form of caring. A memory surfaced. Sharp and sudden. I was 18, just before leaving for college. Lydia had come into my room while I was packing. She was holding her phone. "Riley, sweetie, I am setting up the auto-pay for your dorm essentials. It is so complicated with all these different vendors. Just let me snap a picture of your student ID and your debit card. Front and back. It is just for the records, so we don't have to bother you while you are studying." I had handed them over. I had even held the card steady so she could get the glare off the numbers. She has everything. I realized. She has photos of my IDs. She has my social security number. She has access to the portal. She didn't need to hack me. I handed her the keys because I thought. I trailed off, the bitterness coating my tongue. I thought families didn't do this to each other. "Dysfunctional ones do," Matthew said. "Predatory ones do." He closed his laptop and looked at me. "You have the data. Now you need the law. I am a forensic analyst. Riley, I can prove the numbers don't add up, but I cannot file the motion to stop her. You need a lawyer." "I cannot afford a lawyer," I said. "You saw my bank account. I have $300 to my name." "You are a student," Matthew said. "You pay fees every semester for student services. One of those services is legal aid. Use it." The next morning, I skipped my cost accounting lecture. It was the first class I had missed in 2 years. I walked across the quad to the Student Services building. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold, students laughing and rushing to class. They looked so light, so unburdened. I felt like I was carrying a backpack full of lead. I found the legal aid office on the second floor. It was a small, cramped suite with posters about tenant rights and plagiarism defense. I told the receptionist I had an emergency regarding financial identity theft. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Amelia Rhodes. Amelia did not look like the lawyers on television. She was young, maybe 28, with messy curly hair tied back in a bun and a hoodie that said Yale Law over a t-shirt. But when she looked at my spreadsheet, the one I had printed out in the library at midnight, her eyes sharpened. "Walk me through this," she said. Her voice was brisk, professional. I laid it out, the physical assault, the stranger, Matthew, and his connection to my mother, the loan I didn't sign, the IP addresses, the diversion of refunds to Lydia's account. Amelia listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving fast. When I finished, she put the pen down and looked at me. "Riley," she said, "do you know what financial abuse is?" "I guess," I said. "It is when someone steals your money." "It is more than that," Amelia said. "It is a pattern of controlling a partner or a family member's ability to acquire, use, and maintain economic resources. It is designed to create dependency. In the state of Colorado, what you are describing, using an adult child's personal identifying information to obtain credit without their consent, is identity theft. It is a felony. It does not matter that she is your stepmother. It does not matter that she bought you dinner or put a roof over your head. The law sees you as an independent entity." "My dad signed the loan too," I said quietly. Is he going to get in trouble?" Amelia sighed. "If he knowingly co-signed a fraudulent loan, yes, he is liable, but if she manipulated him, or if she signed his name too, he might be a victim as well. But right now, my client is you, not your father." She pulled a form from her drawer. "We can file for a temporary restraining order based on the physical assault in the dorm," she said. "That is the immediate step. But for the financial side, we need to formally dispute the debt with the Department of Education and file a police report for identity theft." "A police report?" My stomach tightened. "Against my family?" "They are not acting like family, Riley," Amelia said firmly. "They are acting like a syndicate. Lydia Bennett slapped you because she was losing control. Violence is the last resort of a manipulator who realizes the victim is waking up." She leaned forward. "You have done incredible work with this spreadsheet. This is admissible evidence. You have the who, the what, the when, and the where. Most victims come in here with just a bad feeling. You came in with a forensic audit." "I am an accounting major," I said, a small spark of pride cutting through the fear. "Good," Amelia said, "because we are going to need that brain. I can handle the filings, but you need to keep digging. I want you to request your full credit report from all 3 bureaus. I want you to request the physical login logs from the university's IT department. Matthew can tell you the specific technical language to use so they don't ignore you." I left Amelia's office an hour later with a folder of forms and a heavy realization. The slap in the dorm room was not an isolated incident. It wasn't just Lydia having a bad day. It was a tactical strike. She had hit me because I had touched the web she had spent 10 years spinning. That night, I sat in the university library. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. The cleaners were vacuuming the rugs in the distance. My table was covered in papers. I looked at the timeline I had built. Year 1. Grace dies. Life insurance disappears. Year 2. House refinanced. Money vanishes. Year 3. College fund drained. Loans initiated. Year 4 to present. Systematic skimming of refunds and accumulation of debt in my name. I looked at the numbers. They weren't just math anymore. They were fingerprints. I could see Lydia's greed in the withdrawals. I could see my father's cowardice in the co-signatures, and in the interest rates compounding daily. I could see the chains they had forged to keep me coming back, to keep me needing them, to keep me under control. Matthew was right. Grace had left me a key, but she hadn't left me a solution. She had left me the tools to build my own. I picked up a highlighter and marked the next line on the spreadsheet. Transaction date, June 15th, amount, $5,000. Description, emergency personal loan. I didn't remember an emergency in June, but I was going to find out exactly what emergency Lydia had funded with my credit score. I wasn't just Riley the victim anymore. I was Riley the auditor. And I was about to close the books on Lydia Bennett. Lydia could not touch me on campus anymore. The incident report filed by my RA and campus security had put a temporary informal block on her access to the residence halls. She had been trespassed from the building, a sterile term that made my skin crawl. She had left a message on my phone. One long, rambling, 3-minute voicemail. That was a masterpiece of deflection. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. She was hurt. She was worried about my mental state. She knew she had lost the physical battle. So, she opened a new front. Psychological warfare. 2 days after the incident, my phone buzzed with a notification from a new group chat. It was created by Lydia on a popular messaging app. The name of the group was Bennett Family Support. The profile picture was an old, out-of-focus photo of my father and me at a barbecue, a time before her. Then the messages began. It was a single, long text from Lydia, sent to a dozen relatives, aunts, uncles, my older cousins, and my father. To my beloved family. It began. I am writing this with the heaviest heart I have ever known. As you may have heard, our dear Riley is going through a terrible crisis. The pressures of her studies at Hawthorne State have triggered something deeply troubling. She has been suffering from severe paranoia, particularly delusions about money and being stolen from. She seems to have forgotten who she is and how much her father and I have sacrificed to give her the world. I could feel the blood draining from my face as I read it on the bus, on my way to meet Matthew. On Tuesday night, I drove all the way to Denver, 2 hours, because I received a frantic call from her roommate. I'm not sure if Riley knows this, saying Riley was in a state of distress, not making sense. When I arrived, my worst fears were realized. She was hysterical. She did not recognize me. She accused me of the most awful, impossible things. When I tried to calm her, to just hold her, she became violent. She pushed me. She screamed. I had to call security for her own safety. It was the most traumatic night of my life, but I would do it again to protect her. The lie was so total, so complete, it was almost brilliant. She had taken the event and flipped it 180 degrees, casting herself as the hero victim and me as the unhinged, violent ingrate. She had even co-opted my roommate, Chloe, into her narrative, a lie Chloe would later furiously deny to me, showing me her phone with no outgoing calls to Lydia. My father, of course, immediately chimed in. His message was shorter. A really tough time for us all. We just want what is best for Riley. Then, a text from him, privately, to me. Riley, please call your Aunt Carol. We are all very worried. Lydia is just trying to help you. Don't make this into a bigger mess. You know how much she loves you. She is building a case, Amelia said over the phone when I read her the texts. I was sitting in a soundproof study room in the library, a space I had booked for 2 hours. This is a classic Darvo tactic. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She knows she's been caught, so she is preemptively discrediting you to the entire support system. By the time you try to tell them the truth, you will sound like the crazy one she has already told them you are. So what do? I asked, my voice small. Do I respond? Do I send them my spreadsheet? No, Amelia said, her voice sharp. You do not engage on her battlefield. Right now, any defense you make will be seen as proof of your paranoia. You wait. You keep gathering evidence. She has made a move. Now we see her next. We did not have to wait long. That evening, Lydia made her next move in the group chat. Thank you all for your beautiful messages of support. She wrote, Thomas and I feel so wrapped in love. We have spoken to my sister-in-law, our wonderful Carol, and she has graciously offered to host a family intervention at her home this Saturday at 7 p.m. This is not a trial. This is not about blame. This is about healing. This is about getting Riley the help and support she needs to get back on her feet. Riley, honey, we are all going to be there, waiting for you with open arms. We love you more than you know. The trap was set. It was perfect. Aunt Carol, my father's older sister, was the designated peacemaker of the Bennett family. Her house, with its overstuffed couches and smell of baked bread, was the family's Switzerland. All major announcements, births, deaths, divorces, were handled in her living room over weak coffee. To refuse an invitation from Aunt Carol was to declare war on the family itself. And the language, intervention, healing, support, she was framing me as a patient, an addict, a person who had lost their way. If I refused to go, it proved I was unstable and in denial. If I went, I was walking into a room where every single person had already been primed to believe I was insane. She is going to have paperwork, Matthew said. We were in a coffee shop off campus. The Grace contingency files open on his encrypted hard drive. This is not about healing. This is about closing her legal exposure. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Anything, he said, taking a sip of black coffee. A financial power of attorney, giving her legal control over your accounts, a debt consolidation agreement, where you admit to the loans and agree to a repayment plan she manages, a medical release form, giving her access to your mental health records. She needs your signature, Riley. She needs to legitimize the fraud. She will use the collective emotional weight of your entire family to press down on you until you sign a piece of paper just to make the yelling stop. Amelia agreed. It is a pressure cooker, she told me during our check-in. They will isolate you. They will all take turns telling you how much they love you, how much you are hurting them, how you are not yourself. They will tell you that the only way to fix the family is to sign the paper. It is the single most effective tool of a domestic abuser. You cannot go alone. So I should not go? The relief was so immediate it surprised me. "I did not say that," Amelia replied. "If you do not go, you lose the narrative forever. You are officially the crazy niece who abandoned her family. No, you go. But you do not go as a daughter. You go as my client." So we made a plan. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. I was no longer a student. I was a paralegal building our case. I went to the campus IT office and used the exact technical language Matthew had given me to request a full log of every login to my student portal for the last 3 years, citing a potential security breach. The technician, impressed by my specificity, printed it for me. It was 30 pages long, a damning list of timestamps and IP addresses from Aurora. I went to campus security and got a copy of the official incident report from Tuesday night. It described me as visibly distressed, with a red mark on her left cheek, and Lydia as aggressive, refusing to de-escalate, and requiring a 2-officer escort from the premises. Amelia, working her own magic, managed to get a subpoena for the security camera footage from the 3rd-floor hallway. It was grainy, but it was undeniable. It showed Lydia storming down the hall, pushing past the RA, and lunging into my room. There was no footage of me attacking her. I took the $300 from my bank account. I spent $60 of it on a digital voice recorder, small enough to fit in my pocket. I spent the rest of it at a copy center, making 3 identical binders. Each binder contained the campus security incident report, a printed photo of my face from that night, the red handprint clearly visible under the fluorescent light, the 30-page IT login report, my spreadsheet, revised, cross-referencing my class schedule with the login times, my bank statements, with Lydia's account number highlighted, a printed transcript of the voicemail she had left me, the one where she claimed to be worried. I was in my dorm room, hole-punching the last of the pages, when Matthew called. "I have something for you," he said. His voice was low. "It might change the dynamic on Saturday." "What is it?" I was digging through Grace's encrypted files again, the notes on Lydia. I found a reference to Aunt Carol. I stopped what I was doing. "What about her?" It is a scanned entry from Grace's journal, just a few weeks before the accident. She wrote that Carol had called her, upset. Carol had found a $2,400 charge on her Visa from a company she did not recognize, LBS Financial Solutions. She had called Lydia for advice. Since Lydia was the financial expert, Lydia had apparently told her it was a back-end error from the bank and that she would take care of it. The charge was reversed a week later. But Grace noted that LBS traced back to a shell corporation in Wyoming. Grace suspected Lydia was testing the waters, stealing from her own sister-in-law, then fixing it to look like the hero. I sat down on my bed. "Aunt Carol, she is not just the peacemaker. She is another victim." "Or she was," Matthew said. "Lydia probably cleaned up her tracks. But the point is, Lydia has a history with her. Carol might be more receptive to you than you think, especially if she feels she was duped." "Thank you, Matthew," I said. "Be smart, Riley," he said. "This is not a family meeting. It is a deposition. Act accordingly." I hung up. I looked at the 3 binders on my desk, professionally tabbed and organized. I placed the new, fully charged voice recorder in the pocket of my jacket. My phone buzz. It was a new message. In the Bennett Family Support group chat. This one was from Lydia. "Just one more sleep. Cannot wait to see everyone tomorrow night at 7. We are going to hug our Riley and start the healing. Family is everything." She had added a string of red heart emojis. I looked at her message, the fake, saccharine performance of it. Then I looked at the binders. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. I picked up the first binder. It felt solid, heavy, and cold. It was the best homework I had ever done. I was not a child being called to the principal's office. I was an auditor, and I was about to present my findings. I parked my car 3 houses down from Aunt Carol's place. It was exactly 7 o'clock. My hands were cold, but not from the weather. I checked my bag one last time. 3 binders, 1 voice recorder, already blinking red, my phone, set to silent. I walked up the driveway. The living room curtains were drawn, but I could see the silhouettes of people moving inside. It looked like a funeral wake. In a way, I suppose it was. I was about to bury the version of this family that Lydia had constructed. Aunt Carol opened the door. She looked tired, her eyes darting nervously over my shoulder as if expecting me to bring a weapon. "Come in, Riley," she said, her voice tight. "We are all waiting." The living room had been rearranged. The coffee table was pushed aside. The armchairs and dining chairs were arranged in a semicircle, facing a single wooden chair placed in the center of the room, the hot seat. Everyone was there. My father, Thomas, sat with his head in his hands. My Uncle Bob and his wife, my cousin Jenna, who was texting on her phone and didn't look up, and right in the center, next to my father, was Lydia. She had dressed for the role of the grieving, martyred mother. She wore a simple gray cardigan and slacks, no jewelry, no makeup. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She held a tissue in one hand and a neat stack of papers in the other. I did not sit in the wooden chair. I walked past it and stood near the fireplace, keeping my back to the wall. "Riley, please sit," Aunt Carol said gently, gesturing to the chair. "We just want to talk." "I am fine standing," I said. Lydia sniffled loudly. She reached out and touched my father's arm, a gesture of performative comfort. "It is okay, Thomas," she whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. "She is defensive. It is part of the episode." She stood up slowly, smoothing her cardigan. She looked at the family, making eye contact with each person before her gaze landed on me. It was a look of profound, manufactured pity. "I want to start by saying that I forgive you, Riley," Lydia began. Her voice trembled perfectly. "I know you did not mean to hurt me Tuesday night. I know the stress of school has been too much. When you struck me." A gasp went around the room. Uncle Bob shook his head, muttering something about discipline. "When you struck me," Lydia continued, touching her cheek, "I was not angry. I was terrified. I realized that we have failed you. We pushed you too hard. And now, these delusions you are having about money, about people stealing from you, it is a cry for help." She lifted the papers in her hand. "I have spoken to a specialist," she said, "and I have prepared a plan. We are going to take a break from school, just for a semester. We need to get your medication stabilized, and since you are clearly overwhelmed by finances, your father and I are willing to take that burden off your shoulders completely. I have a medical power of attorney here, and a temporary financial guardianship form. It just means we can pay your bills and manage your accounts while you get better." "She is right, Riley," Cousin Jenna piped up from the corner. "You are lucky they even want to help you after you hit her. If I hit my stepmom, I would be in jail." "Ungrateful," Uncle Bob muttered. "We pay for everything, and this is the thanks we get." My father finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "Riley, honey, please, just sign the papers. Lydia has been working on this all week. She just wants you to be safe." The room was a wall of pressure. It was suffocating. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the years of Lydia's subtle conditioning that had led to this moment. If I screamed, I was crazy. If I cried, I was unstable. So I did neither. I reached into my bag. "I did not hit you, Lydia," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I presented a budget variance analysis in class. "And I am not having a mental breakdown. I am having a financial audit." I pulled out the 3 binders. I walked over to Aunt Carol and placed one in her lap. I placed the second one on the side table next to Uncle Bob. I kept the third one open in my hands. "What is this?" Aunt Carol asked, looking down at the cover. "Page 1, I said. "The security report from the university. You will see the officer notes that Lydia Bennett was the aggressor and was trespassed from the building. You will also see a still image from the hallway camera showing her forcing her way into my room." Lydia laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Oh, Riley, you can type up anything on a computer these days. This is just more of your paranoia." "Page 3, I continued. ignoring her. "This is a log from the university IT department. It lists every single time my student financial portal was accessed in the last 2 years." I looked at Uncle Bob, who was frowning at the binder. "Bob, look at the highlighted rows. September 12th, 2:15 in the afternoon." "Okay," Bob said, confused. "So what?" "On September 12th at 2:15, I was in my advanced database class. I have attached the attendance sheet signed by my professor. I was in downtown Denver. But look at the login location." Bob squinted. "Aurora, Comcast cable." "That is this house," I said, pointing to where my father sat. "Someone logged into my account, impersonating me, from this house, while I was sitting in a classroom 30 miles away, and 5 minutes after that login, an income verification form was uploaded to approve a new loan." "That is a glitch," Lydia snapped. Her voice lost a fraction of its warmth. "Technology makes mistakes." 37 mistakes?" I asked, flipping a page. 37 times. My account was accessed from the IP address assigned to the router in Thomas and Lydia Bennett's home, every single time. It coincided with a loan increase, a refund diversion, or a password change. "Refund diversion?" Aunt Carol asked. She was reading now. Her glasses were perched on her nose. "When the school sends leftover loan money back to the student for living expenses," I explained. "Look at page 10. Carol, May 10th, $2,400 refunded, sent to a bank account ending in 8890. I saw Lydia stiffen. Her knuckles were white on the paper she was holding. "I do not have an account ending in 8890, I said. "But I think you might recognize it. Mom, Lydia, isn't that the account you use for your consulting business? The one you used to pay for the catering at Jenna's graduation party?" The room went silent. Jenna looked up from her phone. Aunt Carol looked slowly from the page to Lydia. "That is a joint account," Lydia shouted. Standing up, the gray cardigan no longer looked soft. It looked like armor. "I was holding that money for her. She would have spent it on drugs or clothes. I was putting it aside." "There is no savings account," I said calmly. I pulled the credit report. The money was spent at Nordstrom, Sephora, and a luxury resort in Vail. "This is ridiculous," my father stammered. "Lydia, tell them you were saving it." "I do not have to explain myself to a child," Lydia yelled. Her mask was slipping. "This is a private family matter. Who do you think you are? Coming in here with your little binders?" "She is my client." The front door opened. I had left it unlocked. Amelia Rhodes stepped into the hallway. She was wearing a sharp navy blazer and carrying a briefcase. She did not look like a student today. She looked like a shark. "Who the hell are you?" Uncle Bob stood up. "My name is Amelia Rhodes," she said, walking into the living room and standing next to me. "I am an attorney representing Riley Bennett, and what you are looking at in those binders is evidence of felony identity theft, wire fraud, and financial abuse of a dependent adult." "We are not doing this," Lydia hissed. She grabbed Thomas's arm. "Thomas, get them out. They are trespassing." "Actually," Amelia said, "Riley was invited, and I am her counsel. If you want us to leave, we will go straight to the district attorney, or we can finish this conversation." Thomas looked pale. He looked at Lydia, then at the binder in Carol's lap. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma. "Thomas, do something!" Lydia shrieked. I don't know," my father whispered. "While you are deciding," a deep voice came from the doorway, "I have something Thomas needs to hear." Matthew Cole stepped in. He filled the doorway, his leather jacket creaking. He held a single, yellowed envelope in his hand. Lydia froze. Her face went the color of ash. She recognized him. She remembered the man she had seen at my mother's office 10 years ago. "You," she whispered. "Hello, Lydia," Matthew said. He walked past the stunned relatives and stood in front of the fireplace. "It has been a long time." "Who is this?" Aunt Carol asked, her voice trembling. "What is going on?" "I worked with Grace," Matthew said to the room. "I worked with Riley's mother, and before she died, she gave me a letter. She told me to keep it safe until Riley was old enough to understand it, or until she was in danger. He opened the envelope. He pulled out a piece of paper covered in my mother's neat, looping handwriting. "Read it," I said. Matthew cleared his throat. "October 14th, 2015. If you are reading this, then my fears were well-founded. Lydia has been asking questions about Thomas's life insurance. She has been suggesting investments that do not exist. I have tried to warn Thomas, but he is lonely, and she is very good at what she does. If anything happens to me, Matthew, please watch over Riley. Ensure she is not used as a checkbook. Do not let Lydia erase me. Do not let her take what belongs to my daughter." My father let out a sound like a wounded animal. He stared at the letter in Matthew's hand. "Grace wrote that?" "She wrote it 3 days before the crash," Matthew said. He looked at my father. "She knew. Thomas, she tried to tell you." Lydia was shaking. "That is a forgery. He is lying. He is in love with her or something sick like that." But the momentum had shifted. The room felt different. The heavy blanket of family unity had been ripped away, exposing the rot underneath. Aunt Carol was staring at the binder in her lap. She was not looking at the page I had shown her. She had flipped to the back, to the appendix where I had listed the known email aliases Lydia used. p.bennett.familycare@gmail.com. Carol read aloud. Her voice was breathless. "That is the email she used to recover my passwords," I said. "Why?" Carol looked up. Her eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, horrifying realization. 2 years ago, Carol said, her voice shaking, "I needed a loan to repair the roof. I have bad credit. Lydia said she could help me. She said she knew a private lender who worked with families." Lydia took a step back. "Carol, we are not talking about that." "She did all the paperwork for me," Carol continued, ignoring her. "She said it was approved. I have been paying the monthly installments to an account she gave me. But last month I got a notice from a bank I never heard of, about a default." Carol stood up. She walked over to me and pointed at the email address in the binder. "That email," she said, "that is the email on the loan document I found, the one I thought was a mistake." She turned to Lydia. The look on her face was not the look of a peacemaker. It was the look of a woman who had been betrayed in her own home. "You told me that email belonged to the loan officer," Carol said. "You said his name was Peter Bennett, but there is no Peter. P. Bennett, parent Bennett." "Carol, you are confused," Lydia stammered, backing away until she hit the bookshelf. "It was a complex structure. I was helping you." "You took a loan out in my name," Carol screamed. It was a sound I had never heard from her. "You took the money, and you have been making me pay you back while the real loan goes into default?" "Oh my God," Cousin Jenna whispered. "Mom, isn't that the email Aunt Lydia used for my car insurance?" The room exploded. It wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was a riot. Uncle Bob was grabbing the binder from the table. Jenna was scrolling frantically through her phone. My father was sitting in the chair, staring at Lydia as if she were a stranger he had just met in a dark alley. "You did not just steal from me," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You stole from everyone. You used this family like a credit card." Lydia looked around the room. She saw no allies. She saw no support system. She saw a circle of victims who had finally compared their notes. She straightened her back. She dropped the act of the weeping mother. Her face went cold and hard. The face I had seen in the dorm room. "You are all idiots," she spat. "I managed this family's finances because none of you were smart enough to do it. I kept this family afloat." "No," I said. "You kept yourself afloat, and we are the ones who are drowning." Amelia stepped forward. "Lydia Bennett, I would advise you to stop talking. Anything you say can be used in the civil and criminal filings we are preparing." Lydia looked at the papers in her hand. The guardianship forms she had been so sure I would sign. She crumpled them into a ball and threw them on the floor. "I am leaving," she said. "You can leave," Aunt Carol said, her voice icy. "But Thomas stays." Lydia paused at the door. She looked back at my father. "Thomas, are you coming?" My father looked at the woman he had married. Then he looked at me. He looked at the red mark that was still faintly visible on my cheek. He looked at the letter from Grace that Matthew was holding. He did not stand up. He did not speak. He just looked down at his hands. Lydia made a noise of disgust, slammed the front door, and was gone. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of secrets anymore. It was the silence of a bomb that had finally gone off. I looked at the crumpled ball of paper on the floor, the permission slip for my own enslavement. I walked over and picked it up. I smoothed it out, looked at the blank signature line, and then tore it in half. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Rip. "I think," I said to the room of stunned relatives, "that the meeting is adjourned." The silence in Aunt Carol's living room did not last long. It was broken by the sound of the front door flying open again. Lydia stood in the frame, her chest heaving, her face flushed a blotchy red. She had gone to the car, expecting my father to trot behind her like a well-trained dog. When he hadn't, she had come back. She was not used to leaving a room without winning the argument. "Thomas," she barked, ignoring the rest of us. "Get your coat. We are leaving. Now." My father did not move. He was staring at the floor, his hands gripping the armrests of the recliner so hard his knuckles were white. "Thomas, do not make me count to 3, Lydia hissed, reverting to the tone one uses with a toddler. "These people have been poisoned by a mentally unstable girl. We are going home." "He is not going anywhere," Aunt Carol said. Her voice was shaking, but it was loud. She was holding her phone in one hand and the binder I had given her in the other. "And neither are you, Lydia. Not until you explain this." Lydia scoffed, stepping fully back into the room. "Explain what? More forgeries?" Carol walked toward her, thrusting the phone screen in her direction. "I just logged into my bank app. I searched for that loan deposit you helped me with 2 years ago. The one for the roof repair. You told me the bank wired it to a holding account because of some regulation about contractors. You said you would pay the roofer directly." "And the roof got fixed, didn't it?" Lydia snapped. "So what is the problem?" "The problem," Carol said, her voice rising, "is that the loan amount was for $15,000, but the roofing company invoice, which I just found in my email archive, was only for $8,000. Where is the other $7,000, Lydia?" Lydia blinked. For a second, the calculation was visible in her eyes. "Admin fees, interest prepayment. You do not understand how these loans work. Carol, that is why you needed me." "I understand math," Carol said. "And I understand that I am paying interest on $7,000 that never touched my roof. And according to Riley's binder, that holding account belongs to you." The domino had fallen, and it hit the next one immediately. Cousin Jenna, who had been scrolling through her own credit card history in the corner, suddenly stood up. She looked sick. "You borrowed my card," Jenna said, her voice small and horrified. "Last Christmas. You said you wanted to buy Uncle Thomas a new watch as a surprise, but you had left your wallet at home. You said you would Venmo me the money right away." "I paid you back," Lydia said dismissively. "I remember sending the transfer." "You paid me back $300, Jenna said. "But I am looking at my statement from last December. There is a charge for $300 at the watch store, but there is another charge, on the same day, for $1,200. Lydia rolled her eyes. "I probably bought groceries for the family dinner. I host everyone. Jenna, it costs money." "It wasn't a grocery store," Jenna said, holding up her phone. "It was Emeralds and Company, the jewelry store at the mall." All eyes in the room shifted to Lydia's wrist. She was wearing a delicate tennis bracelet with green stones. She instinctively covered it with her other hand, pulling her sleeve down. "This is absurd," Lydia spat. "You are all rewriting history. I have been generous with you. I have helped every single person in this room." "Helped us?" Uncle Bob spoke up from the sofa. He was a quiet man, usually content to let Carol run the show. But his face was dark. "Is that what you call it?" What about the time you helped me refinance my truck? You told me the paperwork was lost, and we had to redo it. Did we redo it, Lydia? Or did you take out a second line of credit against the vehicle? I don't have to listen to this, Lydia screamed. You are all being manipulated. Look at her. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Riley is sitting there laughing at you. She hates this family. She wants to destroy us because she is jealous that Thomas chose me. I was not laughing. I was sitting perfectly still on the edge of the fireplace hearth. I felt a strange, cold sensation washing over me. It was relief. For years, I had thought I was the problem. I thought I was too sensitive, too selfish, too difficult. I thought I was the only one who felt the screws tightening. But as I looked around the room, watching my aunt, my cousin, and my uncle realizing they had been fleeced, I realized I wasn't the black sheep. I was just the canary in the coal mine. I was the first one to stop singing and start choking on the gas. I am not laughing, Lydia, I said quietly. I am auditing. Shut up. Lydia lunged toward me, but Amelia stepped in between us. Sit down, Ms. Bennett, Amelia said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the weight of a judge's gavel. Right now? Lydia stopped. She looked at Thomas again. He still hadn't moved. Thomas, she screamed. Are you going to let them treat me like this? After everything I have done for you? I saved you. When Grace died, you were a wreck. You couldn't even tie your shoes. I came in and I fixed everything. I raised your daughter. I managed your life. She rushed over to him, grabbing his shoulders, shaking him. We have secrets. Thomas, she whispered frantically, though everyone could hear. Don't forget that I protected you. I kept the bad things away. If you turn on me, I will tell them. I will tell them how weak you really were. It was a threat, pure and simple. She was trying to blackmail him with his own grief. My father looked up at her. His eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. What secrets, Lydia? He whispered. That I was depressed? That I wanted to die? Everyone knows that. No, Lydia hissed. The financial mess. The debts Grace left. I paid them off. I used my own money to save this family's reputation. That is a lie. A deep voice cut through the hysteria. Matthew Cole stepped forward from the fireplace. He held up the second document from the envelope Grace had left. Grace did not leave debts, Matthew said firmly. Grace Bennett was a senior risk analyst. She had 0 credit card debt. The house was nearly paid off, and she had a life insurance policy. Lydia froze. She let go of Thomas's shoulders. We are not talking about the insurance, she said. That is private. It is not private, Matthew said. It is data, and I have the transaction history. He turned to my father. Thomas, do you remember the week after the funeral? You received a check from the insurance company. It was for $450,000. My father nodded slowly. Yes, it went into the joint account, for Riley's college, for the future. It went into the joint account on a Tuesday, Matthew corrected, and on Thursday, $300,000 of it was transferred out. The room gasped. My father's mouth fell open. Transferred where? Thomas asked. To an account under the name LBS Consulting LLC. Matthew read from the paper. Registered in Wyoming. Sole proprietor, Lydia Bennett. My father stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. He looked at Lydia, his eyes wide with a horror that was finally piercing through the fog of his denial. You told me, my father's voice cracked. You told me the market crashed. You told me we lost the money in bad investments. You said we had to be frugal. You made Riley work at the diner because you said we were broke. We were broke, Lydia shrieked. Thomas, you don't understand. The cost of living, the taxes. I had to move the money to protect it from whom? Matthew asked. From the daughter it was intended for? You stole it, Thomas said. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He swayed on his feet. You stole Grace's money. You stole my daughter's future. And you made me think it was my fault for being bad with numbers. I did it for us, Lydia cried, tears streaming down her face now, but they looked like oil, slick and calculated. I needed capital to start my business so I could support us. I was investing in our future. Thomas, I am your wife. And Riley is my daughter, Thomas said. His voice was gaining strength. And Carol is my sister, and you stole from them too. Amelia stepped forward, looking around the room. I want everyone to listen to me very carefully, she said. What we are uncovering here is not just a family dispute. It is not just a civil matter of borrowed money. This is a pattern of systemic fraud. We have wire fraud. We have identity theft. We have elder abuse potentially. If she has targeted the older relatives, we have forgery. She looked at the faces in the circle. I am going to ask a question, Amelia said, and I want you to be honest, because this is going to the police. Is there anyone else in this room who gave Lydia their social security number, their credit card, or access to their bank account because she offered to help or fix something? The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, a hand went up. It was Uncle Bob. Then Cousin Jenna raised her hand. Then, from the back of the room, my father's youngest cousin, Mike, raised his hand. She said she could get me a tax refund. He mumbled. Then my father raised his hand. It was a sea of hands, a forest of victims. Lydia Bennett had not just married into a family, she had acquired a client list. She had turned our trust, our grief, and our desire to help each other into a revenue stream. Lydia looked around the circle. She turned a full 360 degrees. Everywhere she looked, she saw eyes that were no longer clouded by her charm. She saw anger. She saw betrayal. She saw the end of the line. She backed away from Thomas. She bumped into the coffee table. She looked at the pile of papers she had thrown on the floor, the papers she had been so sure would grant her total control over me. She bent down and snatched them up, her movements jerky and desperate. It was a reflex, the instinct to hold on to the paperwork even when the game was lost. You are all making a mistake, she said. Her voice was thin, stripped of its power. You will see. You will all go bankrupt without me. I was the only one holding this mess together. Get out, my father said. He didn't scream it. He didn't shout. He said it with the quiet, devastating finality of a man who has nothing left to lose. Thomas? Get out of my sister's house, Thomas said, and do not go back to our house. I am changing the locks tonight. Lydia opened her mouth to speak, to launch one last manipulation, one last guilt trip, but she looked at Matthew, who was standing like a sentinel by the fireplace. She looked at Amelia, who was already typing on her phone, likely drafting the police report. She looked at me. I met her gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I just watched her. She made a sound in her throat, a strangled noise of pure frustration. She turned and walked to the door. She didn't slam it this time. She couldn't. There was no power left in the gesture. She opened it and stepped out into the dark, cold night. The door clicked shut. The sound echoed in the silence of the living room. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. For a long time, nobody moved. We just stood there, in the wreckage of the truth, listening to the sound of her engine starting outside and fading away down the street. I looked at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear. I looked at the binder in Aunt Carol's lap. The numbers on the page were black and white, unmoving, honest. I am sorry, my father whispered into the silence. He sank back into his chair and covered his face with his hands. Oh God, Grace, I am so sorry. I didn't go to him, not yet. I stood by the wall, feeling the new weight of the room. It was heavy, yes, but it was the weight of reality, and for the first time in 10 years, I could carry it. The air in the living room was thick and toxic, vibrating with the aftermath of the explosion. Aunt Carol was on her phone with her bank's fraud department, her voice a low, furious monotone. Uncle Bob and Jenna were comparing notes, their faces a mixture of confusion and rage. My father was still in his chair, a broken man, weeping into his hands, muttering my mother's name. Grace, Grace, I am sorry. Lydia was still there, trapped by the circle of her victims, her face a rigid mask of fury. She had tried to leave, but Aunt Carol had physically blocked the door. You are not running from this, she had said. Amelia stepped into the center of the room, her voice cutting through the noise. This is not enough, she said, looking at me. Riley, what happened here tonight is a victory, but it is not a legal solution. This is catharsis. This is not justice. Right now, every single thing said in this room is just, he said, she said. If you want to protect yourself, if you want to stop her, this cannot end in a living room. I looked at my father. He was the man who had taught me how to ride a bicycle, who had held me on his shoulders to watch the 4th of July fireworks. Now he was a casualty, sitting in the gray area between victim and accomplice. A part of me, the daughter part, screamed to just stop, to end the pain, to not break him any further. But the woman he had chosen, the woman he had allowed to replace my mother, was a predator, and if I let her walk away, she would just find new prey. She would come back for me. I looked at Amelia, and I nodded. I pulled my phone from my back pocket. My hand was shaking, just slightly, but I gripped it tighter. I went to the call screen and dialed the local non-emergency number. What are you doing? Uncle Bob asked, his voice sharp. Riley, put the phone down. This is the police, Lydia spat, her eyes narrowing. She is calling the police. Thomas, she is calling the police on me, your own wife. Riley, don't, Jenna pleaded. This is family. You do not get cops involved in family. That old, rusty word. Family, the shield Lydia had used to hide behind for a decade. I held up my hand for silence. A voice answered on the other end. Lakewood non-emergency. How can I help you? My voice was clear and cold, like a weather report. My name is Riley Bennett. I need to file a report for assault and identity theft. The suspect is here at this location. My location. I gave them Aunt Carol's address. You bitch, Lydia hissed. You ungrateful psycho bitch. You are making a mistake, Riley, Uncle Bob shouted. You do not cross that line. We handle this internally. No! Aunt Carol's voice cracked like a whip, silencing the room. She was off the phone with the bank, her face pale with fury. We do not handle this internally. That is what we did 10 years ago. We handled Grace's worries by telling her she was being dramatic. We handled our own unease by staying quiet. Look where it got us. If we had listened to Grace then, none of this would be happening. We are done handling things. We are going to listen. We are going to listen to her daughter. She walked over and stood next to me. I am a witness, she said. The doorbell rang 15 minutes later. It was not a friendly knock. It was 2 heavy official raps. Aunt Carol opened the door. 2 uniformed police officers stood on the welcome mat. One was older, with a tired expression. The other was younger, her gaze sharp and assessing. We received a call about a financial dispute, the older officer said. Lydia's entire demeanor shifted. It was the most astonishing performance I had ever seen. The rage vanished. Her face crumpled. Her hand flew to her forehead, and her knees buckled. Oh, thank God. Officers, she sobbed, sinking into the armchair my father had just vacated. Thank God you are here. I am so glad my stepdaughter called you. She needs help. We have been trying to get her help for weeks. The younger officer looked at Lydia, then at me. Ma'am, who are you? I am her mother, Lydia wept, dabbing at her dry eyes. Her stepmother, she is having a terrible breakdown. She has delusions. She thinks we are all stealing from her. And tonight she just snapped. She got violent. She hit me. The room went dead silent. The lie was so audacious, so complete, that it sucked the air out of the room. Before anyone could speak, I stepped forward. I held my binder. Officer, I said, my voice as calm as Lydia's was hysterical. My name is Riley Bennett. I am the one who called. That woman is Lydia Bennett. She assaulted me in my dorm room at Hawthorne State University on Tuesday night." "That is a lie," Lydia shrieked. "I went there to calm her down." "In my binder," I said, "which I am happy to give you, you will find the official campus security report from that night, which states that she was the aggressor and was forcibly removed from the premises. You will also find a photograph of the handprint she left on my face." I opened the binder and handed it to the younger officer. She took it, her eyes scanning the first page. "And as for the delusions," I continued, "that binder also contains a 30-page login report from my university's IT department. It shows, conclusively, that Lydia Bennett has been logging into my financial aid portal from her home IP address in Aurora. While I was verifiably in class in Denver, she has used these logins to divert thousands of dollars in student refunds to her personal bank account and to take out over $20,000 in fraudulent loans in my name. Her bank account number is highlighted on page 20. The older officer, who had been watching Lydia, now looked at me. His tired expression was gone. "In addition," I said, "the other people in this room, my aunt, my cousin, my uncle, have just discovered that she has committed similar acts of fraud against them, under the guise of family financial management." The younger officer flipped a page, then another. She looked at the grainy still from the security camera. She looked at the IP logs. She looked at Lydia. "Madame, Lydia Bennett," the officer said, her voice now flat and official. "I am going to need you to sit up and show me your identification." Lydia's sobbing stopped instantly. I feel faint. I think I need an ambulance." "We can call one," the officer said, unimpressed. "But first, I need your ID, and then I need to speak with your husband." She turned her gaze on my father, who looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Sir, you are Thomas Bennett?" Yes," my father stammered. "Were you aware that your wife was accessing your daughter's accounts?" She handled the finances. I am not good with money. Grace, my first wife, Lydia said she would handle it." "Did you authorize these loans? The ones in your name?" My father looked at the floor. "I signed. Papers. She told me to sign. I trusted her." His voice broke. "I trusted her." The officer sighed and wrote something in her notebook. She looked at Amelia. "And you are?" "Amelia Rhodes. I am Ms. Bennett's legal counsel." "Good," the officer said. She looked back at me. "Ms. Bennett, you have a choice. We can take this report and pass it to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit, which we will do regardless. But based on the assault report and the clear pattern of harassment, you are also eligible to file for an emergency temporary protection order." "She does not need to do that," Lydia said, her voice suddenly cold and sharp again. The victim act was gone. "That is just vindictive." "I want it," I said. "I want the order." "We can serve it right now," the officer said. "It means she is to have no contact with you, no calls, no texts, no emails, and she is not allowed within 100 yards of your person, your residence, or your place of work and study. That means Hawthorne State is off limits to her. If she violates it, she is arrested. Understood?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." The officer nodded. She handed a form to her partner. She turned back to Lydia, who was sitting up straight, her face like stone. "Ma'am, you are being served with a temporary protection order. You are to have no contact with Riley Bennett. Do you understand?" Lydia did not answer. She just stared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Ma'am," the officer repeated, "I need a verbal confirmation that you understand the order." "I understand," Lydia bit out. "Good. Now," the officer said, "we are done here for tonight. A detective will be in touch with all of you." She looked at Lydia, then at my father. "Since you two live at the same address, and that address is now part of a criminal investigation, I am advising you both to leave. This is Ms. Carol Bennett's home. She has asked you to leave." "Thomas?" Lydia said. She stood up. It was the last time she would ever ask him, "Are you coming? Or are you staying with them?" My father stood up. He was shaking. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for, what? Forgiveness? Permission? I had none to give. He looked at the police officers. He looked at his sister, who was staring at him with cold disappointment. And then, in a final act of devastating weakness, he walked over and stood next to his wife. I have to go," he mumbled, not looking at me. She is my wife." "Of course she is," Aunt Carol said. The disgust in her voice was absolute. I watched them walk out the door, not as the power couple of the family, not as the arbiters of my future, but as two suspects in an ongoing investigation. Lydia was not in charge. My father was not in charge. For the first time, I had seen them both stripped of their power. Lydia, by the law; my father, by his own cowardice. The door closed, and this time, the silence was one of peace. 3 weeks after the police officers stood in Aunt Carol's living room, the initial chaos had settled into a cold, procedural war. The temporary protection order was in place. Lydia was legally barred from coming within 100 yards of my dorm, my job, or Aunt Carol's house, where I had been sleeping on the pull-out couch. My father had gone silent, retreating into the house in Aurora like a turtle pulling its head into a shell, communicating only through the lawyer Lydia had hurriedly hired for him. But the real turning point did not happen in a courtroom or a police station. It happened in a quiet, dusty office on the 4th floor of a brick building in downtown Denver. The brass plaque on the door read, "Harris and Associates, Estate Law." Inside, the air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the heavy permanent scent of decisions made long ago. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too big for me. To my left sat Matthew Cole, wearing a clean button-down shirt instead of his leather jacket, though he looked uncomfortable in the formal setting. To my right was Amelia, my shark in a hoodie, who had traded her casual wear for a sharp gray suit. Across the desk sat Mr. Harris. He was a man in his 70s, with thin white hair and hands that shook slightly when he poured water, but his eyes were sharp. He had been my mother's lawyer, not the family lawyer, Grace's lawyer. "I have not seen you since the funeral, Riley," Mr. Harris said softly. "You looked so much like her then. You look even more like her now." He opened a drawer in his massive oak desk and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax, something I thought people only did in movies. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, were instructions: to be opened only when Riley Bennett turns 21, and only in the presence of Matthew Cole. "Your mother came to see me 6 weeks before she passed," Mr. Harris said, placing the envelope in the center of the desk. "She was in the process of drafting a formal trust for you. She was worried about the time it would take to set up, so she left this as a stopgap measure. She called it her insurance policy against bad decisions." He slid the envelope toward me. "She was very specific, Riley. She said that if you were sitting here, it meant 2 things. First, that she was gone, and second, that you needed help." My hands trembled as I reached for it. The paper felt heavy, textured. I broke the wax seal. It made a dry, cracking sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Inside was a stack of documents and a smaller white envelope containing a handwritten letter. I put the documents aside and opened the letter. I recognized the penmanship immediately. It was the same script that used to be on my lunch notes, on the chore list on the fridge, on the birthday cards I had saved in a shoebox. Seeing it now, fresh and urgent, felt like she had just walked into the room. "My dearest Riley," the letter began. "If you are reading this, I am sorry. I am sorry that I am not there to explain this to you myself, and I am sorry that my instincts were right." I had to stop reading for a second. My throat felt tight, like I had swallowed a stone. Matthew reached over and placed a hand gently on the arm of my chair. A silent anchor. I continued reading. "You know I am a woman of data. Riley, I do not believe in ghosts, but I believe in patterns, and the pattern I am seeing in our home lately terrifies me. Lydia is not just a new friend of your father. She is a variable I cannot solve. She asks too many questions about things that do not concern her. She suggests investments to your father that, when I investigate them, lead to dead ends and shell companies. I have tried to tell Thomas, but he is lonely, and grief makes people blind. He thinks I'm being jealous. He thinks I am unsupportive. I am writing this because I fear that if something happens to me, Thomas will be clay in her hands. She knows how to find the cracks in a person and fill them with what they want to hear until she owns the structure. I looked up at Matthew. She knew, I whispered. She knew exactly what Lydia was. She did, Matthew said. Keep reading. I have taken steps. Riley, I cannot stop Thomas from doing what he wants with his own money, or even the money I leave him, but I can protect you. Enclosed with this letter is a list of assets that Lydia does not know about. There is a credit union account in Boulder that I opened under my maiden name, with you as the sole beneficiary. It is not a fortune, but it is what I call your run money. I want you to remember one thing. My smart, logical girl. Money is a tool, not a shackle. People like Lydia use money to bind you to them. They create debt to create obligation. They control the resources to control the person. This money is yours. It is clean. It is your key to walking away. I looked at the document attached to the letter. It was a statement for a high-yield savings account. The balance, with 10 years of compound interest, was just over $45,000. It wasn't millions. It wasn't enough to buy a private island. But to a college student who had been living on ramen noodles and fear, who had $300 to her name and a mountain of fraudulent debt, it was everything. It was enough to pay Amelia. It was enough to rent an apartment that wasn't a dorm room. It was enough to breathe. She saved me, I said, tears finally spilling over. She was saving me 10 years ago. There is more, Mr. Harris said. He pointed to the bottom of the envelope. I reached in and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It looked old. The casing scratched. That drive is encrypted, Matthew said. Grace gave it to me to hold, but she told me the password was something only you would know. She said it was the answer to the question she always asked you when you were learning algebra. I smiled through my tears. I remembered the kitchen table. I remembered the frustration of solving for X. I remembered her tapping the paper with her pencil. Riley, what is the only variable you can ever truly control? I looked at Amelia. I need a laptop. Amelia opened hers and slid it over. I plugged in the drive. The prompt appeared on the screen. Enter password. I typed the answer. My reaction. The drive opened. It was a treasure trove. It contained hundreds of scanned emails and documents. I clicked on a folder labeled Lydia Research. There were background checks my mother had run on Lydia 10 years ago. They showed a history of bankruptcy filings in 3 different states under slightly different names. They showed a previous marriage in Nevada that ended with the husband filing for fraud, a case that was dismissed due to lack of evidence. But the most damning files were the notes my mother had made about the insurance policies. Thomas brought home a modification form today. One note read, Lydia suggested he sign over the beneficiary rights of his policy to a managed trust she would oversee, to save on taxes. I called the insurance carrier. The trust does not exist. The account number she gave him routes to a personal holding company in the Cayman Islands. This proves intent, Amelia said, her eyes scanning the screen rapidly. This proves she was targeting the family assets before Grace even died. This establishes a pattern of predatory behavior. In a civil court, this destroys her defense that she was just a bad money manager. This is premeditated fraud. And look at this, Matthew said, pointing to a scanned email. It was an email from Grace to Thomas, dated 2 weeks before the accident. Thomas, I am begging you, do not sign the power of attorney Lydia gave you. I had Matthew run the numbers on her guaranteed return fund. It is a Ponzi scheme. If you sign that, you are giving her the keys to everything we have built. He knew, I said. The realization was a cold weight in my stomach. My father knew she was dangerous. Grace told him. He knew, Matthew agreed. But he chose to ignore it. And then, when the worst happened, he chose to bury the warning because it was easier than facing the truth. I sat back in the chair, the physical weight of the evidence pressing me down. But the mental weight lifting, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was the daughter of a woman who had seen the wolf at the door and had died trying to bar it. I picked up the handwritten letter again. There was one last paragraph at the bottom. I hope you never have to use this money. Riley, I hope Thomas wakes up. I hope you have a happy, boring life where you only worry about boys and grades. But if you are reading this, then the storm has come. Do not be afraid of the thunder. You are stronger than you think. And remember this, above all else. If one day you have to choose between having a family that looks perfect and being treated with respect, choose respect. You do not owe anyone your dignity. When you choose yourself, you will find your real family. I looked around the room. I looked at Matthew, the stranger who had kept a promise for a decade. I looked at Amelia, the lawyer who was fighting for me like a lioness. I looked at Aunt Carol, who was texting me from the waiting room to make sure I was okay. I found them, I whispered to the letter. I found my real family. What happens now? I asked, looking at Amelia. Now? Amelia closed her laptop with a snap. Now we have the capital to finance the lawsuit, and we have the evidence to win it. We are going to sue for the return of the insurance money. We are going to clear your credit history, and we are going to make sure Lydia Bennett never manages another person's finances again. And the money in the credit union? Mr. Harris asked. I can cut you a cashier's check today. Do it, I said. Transfer it to a new account, one with no connection to the name Bennett. Mr. Harris nodded and began typing. I sat there for a moment, just holding the letter. The paper was warm from my hands. I closed my eyes. For years, I had felt alone in that house in Aurora. I had felt the cold draft of my stepmother's indifference and my father's neglect. But in this office, smelling of lemon polish and old law books, I felt something else. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't Matthew. He was sitting too far away. It wasn't Amelia. It was a sensation, warm and firm and familiar. It was the feeling of being protected. It was the ghost of a woman who had balanced her checkbook at a kitchen table and taught me that freedom was a calculated risk. I pressed the letter to my chest. I got it, Mom, I whispered. I know the variables now. I stood up. I put the check in my pocket. I handed the USB drive to Amelia. Let's go, I said. We have a case to win. We walked out of the office and into the bright, blinding sunlight of Denver. The city looked different. It didn't look like a place where I was a victim. It looked like a ledger that was waiting to be balanced. And for the first time in 10 years, the numbers were finally on my side. The heavy oak doors of the Jefferson County Courthouse did not creak when they opened. They swung on silent, well-oiled hinges, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise that had defined my life for the last 10 years. I walked into courtroom 4B with Amelia Rhodes on my right and Matthew Cole on my left. I was wearing a simple black blazer I had bought at a thrift store with the first bit of money from my mother's secret account. It was not expensive, but it fit. It was mine. On the other side of the aisle, Lydia and Thomas Bennett were already seated. Lydia had chosen her costume carefully. She was wearing a soft, pale blue dress that made her look fragile, almost faded. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before the judge even entered the room. My father sat next to her, staring at the wood grain of the table, shrinking into his suit as if he hoped to disappear entirely. We were there for the hearing regarding the permanent restraining order and the preliminary motions for the civil suit regarding financial abuse and identity theft. The bailiff called out, "All rise!" Judge Holloway entered. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp spectacles and a demeanor that suggested she had zero patience for theatrics. She sat down, opened the file, and looked over the rim of her glasses at the two parties. "We are here to address the petition for a protective order filed by Ms. Riley Bennett against Ms. Lydia Bennett," Judge Holloway said, "and the counterclaims regarding the validity of the allegations. Let us proceed." Lydia's lawyer, a man with a shiny suit and a loud tie, stood up first. He launched into a narrative that I had heard 1,000 times before, but hearing it in a court of law made it sound even more grotesque. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "My client, Lydia Bennett, is a devoted stepmother who has spent the last decade raising a child who was not her own. The plaintiff, Riley, has unfortunately suffered a severe mental health decline following the pressures of university. The incident at the dormitory was not an assault. It was a mother trying to calm a hysterical child. The allegations of financial impropriety are nothing more than the confused ramblings of a young woman who does not understand how household finances work. We are asking for the order to be dismissed and for the family to be allowed to heal privately." Lydia sniffled audibly at the word heal. I looked at my hands. They were folded on the table. They were steady. "Ms. Rhodes?" the judge asked. Amelia stood up. She did not use flowery language. She did not talk about feelings. She picked up the binder, the same one I had built in the library, and walked to the bench. "Your Honor," Amelia said, her voice cool and crisp, "we are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss arithmetic." She placed the binder on the judge's desk. "The defense claims my client is confused about finances. However, the evidence shows a very clear, very lucid pattern of behavior, but not by my client. In Tab A, you will see a log of 37 unauthorized logins to Riley Bennett's Federal Student Aid Portal. These logins occurred from the IP address registered to the defendant's home in Aurora, cross-referencing with Tab B, which is Riley Bennett's university attendance record. You will see that every single one of these logins occurred while Riley was physically present in a classroom, often 30 miles away." The judge flipped the page. The silence in the room grew heavy. "In Tab C," Amelia continued, "you will see the destination of the refund checks generated by these unauthorized loan increases. They were not sent to the university. They were not sent to Riley. They were wired to a personal checking account ending in 8890. Amelia turned and pointed at Lydia. "That account belongs solely to Lydia Bennett. We have subpoenaed the bank records, which are in Tab D. You will see that these student loan funds, federal money intended for education, were used to pay for luxury retail items, spa treatments, and a vacation to Vail." Lydia shifted in her seat. The tissue was forgotten in her hand. "Furthermore," Amelia said, "we have testimony today from Mr. Matthew Cole, a forensic accountant and former colleague of the plaintiff's late mother, Grace Bennett." Matthew took the stand. He was calm, authoritative, the leather jacket replaced by a suit, but the intensity in his eyes remained. He told the court about the encrypted files. He told them about the letter Grace had written 3 days before she died. Grace Bennett was a risk analyst, Matthew testified, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. She identified Lydia Bennett as a financial threat to her family 10 years ago. She explicitly stated in her final letter that she feared Lydia would use financial dependence as a weapon to control her daughter. The evidence on the USB drive she left behind shows that Lydia was attempting to reroute Thomas Bennett's life insurance policy into a shell company before Grace was even in the ground. Lydia's lawyer tried to object, claiming hearsay, but the judge overruled him. "The documents speak for themselves, Counselor," Judge Holloway said. Then came the witnesses I never thought I would see in a courtroom. Aunt Carol took the stand. She was nervous, clutching her purse, but when she looked at Lydia, her expression hardened. "She told me she was helping me fix my roof." Aunt Carol told the judge. "She filled out the loan papers for me because I didn't understand the computer system. I found out last week that she took out $15,000 in my name, paid the roofer $8,000, and kept the rest. I am currently paying interest on money she stole from me." One by one, the illusion of the perfect family crumbled. It wasn't just a story about a stepmother and a stepdaughter anymore. It was a story about a predator and a community of victims. Finally, my father was called to the stand. Thomas Bennett walked slowly. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He sat down and took the oath. "Mr. Bennett?" Amelia asked, standing near the podium. Did you know that your wife, Lydia, was using your daughter's identity to take out student loans? My father looked at Lydia. She was staring at him, her eyes wide, a silent, desperate warning burning in her gaze. Protect me. Protect the secret. Then he looked at me. He saw the young woman sitting straight and tall, the daughter he had failed to protect for a decade. No, Thomas said. His voice was a whisper. Speak up, please, sir, the judge said. No, Thomas said, louder this time. I did not know. But your signature is on the co-signer documents, Amelia pressed. Is that your signature? It looks like it, Thomas said. He took a breath that shuddered in his chest. Lydia handles the paperwork. She brings me stacks of things to sign. She tells me it is for taxes, or for insurance, or for Riley's school. She tells me I don't need to read it because it is too complicated. So I sign. I just sign. So you admit, Amelia said, that you signed legal financial documents binding your daughter to debt without reading them, simply because your wife told you to? Yes, Thomas said. He put his head down. I admit it. I was weak. I just wanted peace. There are no further questions, Amelia said. Judge Holloway closed the file. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, her expression was severe. I have heard enough, the judge said. The evidence presented by the plaintiff is overwhelming. This is not a family misunderstanding. This is a documented, systematic pattern of financial abuse and identity fraud. She looked directly at Lydia. Ms. Bennett, the court finds that you pose a credible threat to the financial and emotional safety of the plaintiff. The temporary protection order is hereby made permanent. You are to have no contact with Riley Bennett. You are to stay 500 yards away from her residence, her university, and her place of employment. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. The judge turned to the clerk. Furthermore, given the testimony regarding fraud and the misuse of federal funds, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing and all exhibits to the district attorney's office for the review of criminal charges. No! Lydia stood up. The soft, fragile act shattered. Her face twisted into the same ugly snarl I had seen in the dorm room. You cannot do this. I am the victim here. That girl is a liar. She turned everyone against me. Sit down, ma'am, the bailiff warned, stepping forward. She is a snake, Lydia screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. I fed her. I clothed her. And this is how she repays me? You are a viper. Riley, you are going to die alone because you betrayed your family. Remove her, Judge Holloway ordered, banging the gavel. 2 bailiffs moved in. Lydia was still screaming as they took her by the arms. She wasn't crying anymore. She was spitting venom, revealing the true face she had hidden behind gardenia perfume and fake smiles for 10 years. Thomas, she yelled, as they dragged her toward the doors. Thomas, do something. Don't let them take me. My father did not move. He sat frozen in the witness box, watching the woman he had allowed to destroy his life being escorted out of the courtroom. The doors swung shut, cutting off her screams. The silence that followed was absolute. Court is adjourned, Judge Holloway said. I walked out into the hallway with Amelia and Matthew. My legs felt light, as if gravity had suddenly released its hold on me. The air in the corridor was cool and smelled of floor wax, but to me, it smelled like freedom. Riley. I turned. My father was standing near the courtroom doors. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He was holding his hat in his hands, twisting the brim nervously. Amelia and Matthew stepped back, giving us space, but they stayed close enough to intervene if I needed them. Riley, my father said again. His voice was cracked. I don't know what to say. I didn't know it was this bad. I swear. I didn't know about the loans. You didn't know because you didn't look, I said. My voice was not angry. It was just tired. Grace told you, 10 years ago. She told you, and you chose not to look. I know, he whispered. Tears were running down his face now. I was so afraid of being alone after your mother died. Lydia. She made everything seem so easy. She took care of everything. I thought I was doing the right thing by letting her handle it. He took a step toward me. Is there any way you can forgive me? I want to fix this. I want to be your father again. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had once been my hero, now reduced to a cautionary tale of willful ignorance. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was a distant feeling, like looking at an old photograph of a house you no longer lived in. I don't hate you, Dad, I said. But forgiveness isn't a switch I can just flip. You let her hit me. You let her steal from me. You watched me work double shifts while she spent my tuition money on handbags, and you said nothing. I am sorry, he sobbed. I am so sorry. I know you are, I said. But I can't carry your guilt for you anymore. I have my own life to build. I straightened my blazer. I don't need you to choose sides between me and Lydia, I said firmly. That is over. What I need you to understand is that from this moment on, my finances, my choices, and my life are off limits. If you want to be in my life, you have to respect those boundaries. You have to earn your way back in. And it starts with you fixing your own mess, without me. My father nodded, the tears dripping onto his suit. I understand, he whispered. I will try. Good luck, Dad, I said. I turned away. I didn't look back. I walked over to Amelia and Matthew, who were waiting by the elevators. You okay? Matthew asked, watching me closely. I am, I said, and I meant it. I really am. We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunshine of Denver. The sky was a piercing, impossible blue. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that finally felt like it belonged to me. That evening, I sat at a small table in my new apartment. It wasn't much, just a studio with a kitchenette and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. My name was on the lease. My money had paid the deposit. There were no shared passwords, no hidden cameras, no phantom debts. I opened the window to let the cool evening breeze in. On the table in front of me lay the letter from Grace. I had read it a dozen times, but tonight, the words felt different. They didn't feel like a warning anymore. They felt like a benediction. Next to the letter lay my laptop, open to an email I had received an hour ago. Subject: Internship offer. Northline, Forensic Analytics. Dear Ms. Bennett, we are pleased to offer you a part-time position as a junior analyst. Your aptitude test scores were exceptional, and Mr. Cole's recommendation speaks highly of your attention to detail. We specialize in uncovering financial discrepancies in family trusts and estate fraud. We believe you would be a valuable asset to our team. I smiled. I touched the screen. I wasn't just going to be an accountant. I was going to be the person who found the truth for other people who couldn't find it themselves. I was going to be the person Grace Bennett wanted me to be. I picked up my pen and opened my journal. I turned to a fresh, blank page. Family is not a place where you owe an infinite debt. Family is where your boundaries are respected. I wrote, the words flowing easily as I translated my feelings into the universal language of truth. Family is not a place where you owe an infinite debt. Family is where boundaries are respected. I looked at the empty room, which was slowly filling with the golden light of sunset. Today, I finally chose my side. I wrote, and I chose me. I closed the journal. The story of Riley the victim was over. The story of Riley the auditor had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and reclaiming one's life. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed Riley's journey, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people who might need to hear it.